Hey, what's up guys? Dustin here, Off-Road. Thanks for stopping by and checking out today's video. So with it being winter time and there being a lot of downtime with the local trails being closed and us driving Jeeps with very limited space, I thought it would be a perfect time to start building this little Overland off-road trailer. My family and I have been camping since I was a very little kid. I have a passion for camping, off-roading, and overlanding. And I've been wanting to build a little trailer for quite some time now so we can take it on our long distance trips. So the trailer I want to use is a 3.5 by 5 foot carry-on utility trailer. I purchased it from Lowe's about 4 or 5 years ago for about $450. I thought it was a great deal. It's a lightweight trailer. It only carries about 900 pounds, but it's tagged and registered for roads. And I thought it would be a great little starter trailer to basically strip down everything and build it back up, kind of beef it up and make it off-road capable. So in this video and in the next couple of episodes, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to be stripping everything down on this trailer, replacing the axle, doing a spring over axle upgrade with a lift to put bigger tires on it. We'll be building a deck lid for an RTT, extending the tongue, beefing up the structural integrity of the trailer itself, and doing things like that. So I'm super excited to start working on this little trailer build. Hope you guys can enjoy it along with me, and let's get to work, guys. So I think I'm gonna set you guys right here, and I'm gonna start cutting things off and basically stripping down this trailer down to the axle. All right, so everything is pretty much stripped off of the trailer that we're no longer going to be using. I'm going to be building it back up from here on out, and I'm going to be using this 2x4 square inch tubing. It's 180 wall, much heavier than the original tongue, and I'm going to be replacing it with this longer tubing. I think it's going to be great as far as maneuverability for the trailer. We're going to go ahead and get this thing set up, bolted in, and burned in. So let's get to work, guys. Riding down the road, if your tongue's not straight, this thing won't track right and it'll be all over the road. So you definitely want to make sure your tongue is straight and square with the wheels and the trailer. Measure from one corner to the corner edge, and I'm getting 70 5/8, and over here I'm also getting 70 5/8. So that's super square as far as the tongue. I've got the tongue level where I want it. I've been using this angle finder to basically find the angle of the tongue, angle of the basket. So I'm really within about 1 degree, and that's gonna be perfect as far as the tongue and the basket, making sure that those two are within 1 degree. So I'm gonna go ahead and start burning this tongue in to the framework, and we'll get it into the next project. All right, so we're getting ready to weld on the hangers onto the frame, both sides. We're gonna go ahead and start with the ones on the front of the trailer, and then we'll go ahead and weld on the ones on the back. So before I've taken off and cut off the old hangers, I'm gonna go ahead, I went ahead and already measured for us where that's gonna be, and about 35 3/4 to the center from this piece of angle to the center of the bolt hole. So I'm gonna go ahead and just measure it right there like so, and that's where I'm gonna weld in both of the hangers. As with everything else, we'll tack everything first before we make our final welds or adjustments. Next, I'm going to be slipping a bolt temporarily through the spring and hanger. That way I can get the rear placement of the rear hanger just right. I'll do the same to the other side, which I've also just tacked in. Now I'm installing the rear hanger and shackles. Now each manufacturer has their own way of determining the best placement for these components. However, for general instruction, the spring bolt hole will be about a 1/2 inch in front of the hanger bolt hole. That way when the springs flex, the shackles will deflect to the rear. Now that I have both sides set up and equal, I'm ready to tack everything in place. Always refer to the manufacturer's instructions, but here's a photo to basically help understand how the setup of the hangers will be in relationship to the springs. You want to be sure to remove the springs from the hangers when you do your finished welding, because the heat could potentially melt the bushings inside of the springs, and you'll be replacing those. So you just don't want those to get hot. Here I'm going to be installing some cross supports for the tongue. This will give it some more rigidity than before. All right, so for the corner ends on the tongue, just to make it real simple, it's easier to take a square and then drop it down, and then you know that those are pretty much at the same spot on the tongue, and then we'll just go ahead and weld these into the tongue. I've already got all the correct angles here and here. Everything's already spot welded to go. So let's get it welded. The flux core wire likes to leave a lot of slag behind, but it just brushes right off, and the welds look actually really pretty underneath. So for the supports on the tongue, we're going to be using a 2x2 1/4 inch angle iron. It's going to be sufficient enough to support the tongue, and will also give us a foundation to install a tongue box. After all the welds have been cooled, it's time to insert the hanger bolts. The serrated shoulder on the bolts hold the bolt from slipping and turning so it doesn't wear out the hole on the hanger. All right, so I've got the springs bolted up to the hangers real nice. Basically just tighten them up and then back them off. You want about a 1/2 millimeter gap on one side. That way there is some looseness for motion as you're driving down the road, articulating off-road, and it allows the springs to work. Springs are bolted up. I'm gonna go ahead and set my 1 3/4 spring perches over the bolt. And we're gonna be doing an axle flip. We're not gonna be putting the spring perch underneath here. We're gonna be setting them on top. And let's go over to the axle that I'm gonna be using. All right, so here's the axle I'm gonna be using. It's got a 60-inch hub face to hub face. And then, as you can already see, the 1 3/4 shafting here has the spring perches already welded on, which is going to be a perfect setup for a frame of this width. Now, my frame is not this width, and I wanted this axle mainly so the axle sticks out further past the frame. That way we can put larger wheels and tires on. Now, the spring and hangers do provide a lot of a lift, but I figured since we're already here and we have to weld on new spring perches anyway, I was just going to go ahead and basically flip the axle as well. So basically we're going to turn the axle over this way, because you can see that there's an arch in the axle. If you look at it down the length of the axle, there's like an arch. We want to kind of maintain that arch, and when we do the flip, we're going to be welding the perches on the opposite side of the arch. On this side, where you can see I've sanded down the paint so we can get the bare metal on both sides, over there and over here. And what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and rest the axles over the spring perches, and then we'll bolt them to the springs and do our finish welds, welding the perches to the axle. So that's why I wanted to do this with this axle. It was just easier to buy a new one. They're not very expensive, about 180 bucks, and it was just a no-brainer to go ahead and go this route. So let's get the axle up onto the springs. We're basically centering the axle to the center of the frame, and I'm going to share with you how I did that. Basically found the center of the frame. It's just 42 inches wide, and then 21 in the center, and then I just marked the center of the axle, which is 30 in the center, and lined those up with my 90-degree straight edge. So that's how I found the center. Now, I did have an issue where these springs wanted to basically shift outward. So I have this ratchet strap tied up to the tubing here, and I'm just going to pull that in to where I can find the distance between here and the outside of the spring perch here to be the same as the outside of this distance of the tube, the end of the tube to this side of the spring perch. Also, I had this nice little flat spot on the original spring perch that came welded on the axle, and we're about 1 degree, which is going to be fine, but I did have it on 0, so I'll have to loosen up these bolts and just kind of rotate the axle until we get about 0 degrees, and that should be level. But first we need to torque these bolts, U-bolts, in a cross pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to get them cinched down to about 30-35 foot-pounds of torque with my torque wrench. And then the axle will be centered up on the frame, and my leaf springs will be square to the axle and the frame. Once we got everything torqued down, we'll go ahead and weld the spring perches to the axle and be done. And then we can put some wheels on. All right, so we just got all the welds done. I think the welds came out really good on both sides. And we did a downward pass for the best penetration. And I'm pretty confident in these welds. If you're unconfident about doing this, definitely want to reach out to a qualified welder, someone who knows what they're doing. That way you have more confidence in your build. But I'm pretty confident in the way those welded all up. And we're gonna be moving along. So I'm gonna get these really good, cleaned up very well, wiped down with some alcohol and then painted, and then we can start putting some wheels on this thing and see what the fitment looks like. But I think the trailer is definitely starting to take shape. All right, so we've ran into our first problem with the axle hub assembly with accepting the new wheel spacers from 4.5-inch pattern to a 5-inch pattern. Basically what happens is the bolt sticks out past the hub face of the new spacer, so we're gonna have to cut all of these bolts down about 1/4 inch off to get a length from the hub face to the end to about 1 3/16 inches. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut these all off with my bandsaw, and then we'll get some Loctite on here and get this thing bolted down so we can get some wheels on this thing. All right, so we're ready to torque down this wheel spacer to the hub. I'm gonna go ahead and set up this little chain tool. It basically is gonna help assist hold the hub while we torque these lug nuts down. Just set it up like that and get my socket wrench, and we're gonna torque these to 85 foot-pounds. And I'm gonna be torquing these in a cross pattern. So I'm pretty happy with that setup there. I'm gonna go ahead and take off my little wrench. All right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and pump some grease into these fittings here. I wanna make sure grease is getting in here. All right, yep, I can definitely see grease squirting out the inside of this cap. So I'm gonna go to the other side and do that. This is very convenient here. Little dust cap to get grease in the bearings. So I've got everything done, painted, axle back on, retorqued to the springs, and I'm just now working on the wiring. I thought as this stuff was drying, the paint was drying, I would work on the wiring. I added this pretty cool light. It's DOT approved. I'll put a link in the description for this one, but added a light, and then I'm just now working on the electrical. I had to get a 10-foot extension cable for the electrical, and I've already gone ahead and soldered all of those together. I'm getting ready to just cover up the soldered joints with some heat shrink, and then I'll tuck these wires back. So these wheels I'm going to be installing are from our JK. They're 33-inch BFG Goodrich, the Baja versions. They've got plenty of meat. They're actually brand new. I don't think they've ever been used. 5x5 wheel pattern, and I think they're gonna look pretty cool. right, so we have the trailer flipped over and it's really starting to take shape. I'm super excited with the outcome. Definitely want to join me for the next phase of the trailer build. We have a lot of stuff coming on. Until then, you guys have a good day. Peace out.